Hello everybody and welcome to the Showcast, a series of candid conversations from the world of film, brought to you by The Film Verdict and hosted by yours truly, Matt Micucci. On this episode we're joined by Félix Dufour-Laperrière, director, writer and animator of the striking new film Death Does Not Exist. Fresh off its premiere at Cannes and now screening at the 2025 Annecy International Animation Film Festival, the film is a haunting, existential 2D animated journey. It follows a young woman who turns her back on her friends after a failed armed attack on wealthy landowners, unravelling into a tale that blends the Faustian with the political, the symbolic with the starkly real, with bold stylistic choices from abstract visuals to a hypnotic palette of greens, oranges and muted yellows. Death Does Not Exist is as much a visual poem as it is a meditation on activism, tragedy and personal reckoning. And it all makes for a fascinating conversation. So fire up an Audio Teeny and listen to the audio waves as they fly through the air. This is the Showcast. Félix, welcome to the Showcast.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's lovely to have you here, and of course we're going to be talking about Death Does Not Exist, a very powerful title, and it's a very powerful movie. But I like to always begin with a simple question to just break the ice, and I'd like to talk about the art of animation and where this journey in animation began for you. If you were to look back for a moment in your life when you realized this was something that you would be really interested in pursuing, even as a career, what moment would that be?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad I know the answer. I had a crucial moment. I was 18 years old. I was loving films. I was thinking about making some, but the sound and the fury of live action directing wasn't for me. And I've stumbled. There were in a DVD shop. There was a free DVD to rent, and it was Jan Svankmajer short films. He's a pretty famous surrealist animator from Czech Republic, from the 70s and 80s. Wonderful, like giant artist, and his short films are a wonder of depth and imagination and liberty, and it was all done by one single person in a small room. So this extraordinary balance of intimacy and eloquence charmed me into animation.
Yeah, what a legend he was. You know, I've seen some of his works, a lot of his works. I love his stuff. I even saw Alice, which was his foray into blending that animation style of his with just live action, but beautiful stuff. And you brought up something really interesting there, the potential of animation, especially when it comes to a film like Death Does Not Exist. It almost feels like this film could almost not have been made as a live action. This had to be an animation film, and an animation film in your style. Wouldn't you agree?
I totally agree. I'm first and foremost an animation filmmaker. So when I'm writing a script, I have moving images, animated. I have an animated mise en scène in mind. The image that emerges from the writing process are all animated. So it's directly linked. It's at the root of the process. And on a second level, when you work your script and you work what the film will be, on the concrete matter of what the film will be, then the animated image offers a lot of possibility, very specific and singular mise en scène possibility. It's a powerful tool, very requiring, I would say, but joyful to use. It's full of surprises and full of painstaking long hours to correct little details in After Effects.
Yeah, and especially the way in which you worked on this film and the style and the approach that you used. And I'd like to maybe ask you that a little later on. But first, let's get into talking about Death Does Not Exist as far as, let's say, the story or the concept is concerned. And obviously, when we talk about that, the best way to approach it is to ask a very simple question. What was the starting point for you? I mean, what was the inspiration behind the concept and the story of Death Does Not Exist?
I wanted to. There were two starting points. First, the attack, like the radical, violent attack by a group of young person attacking a symbol of wealth and power and authority and stability. They're attacking the stability of the world. And that was one starting point. I wanted to explore that. And the second starting point was the Faustian Pact between Hélène and Manon. They kind of agree to go down together, and it's a shared fall in my eyes. So as it is, this Faustian Pact was at the very beginning of the project too. And in my eyes, I tried to make a tragic tale, fantastic in a way, because there's a lot of magical and fantastic elements that are included in it. And tragic because it's a story about contradictions, impossibilities, and opposite necessities, I would say.
Yeah, and actually this balance between, let's say, the more magical fairy tale side of the story and the tragedy, because, you know, there are moments that are particularly dark, let's say. Was that something that required a certain balance as far as the narrative is concerned?
Totally. And I think if you're talking about a very violent and pretty brutal moments, I wanted to make sure that at the same time, violence wouldn't become a spectacle, but not to avoid showing the concrete consequences of it. It's not a walk in the park, you know. It's real things going on without making a spectacle out of it. It was about showing the direct and brutal consequences for those who suffer from it, and for those who are doing it, like perpetrating it. Yeah, it was a reflection that went on all the film, and the balance. I conceived it's a tale. So at the beginning, to put on the system and the mechanic of the tale, for me, there's like 10-15 minutes of almost an action film, very dense. It's going quick, and you're getting into the reality of the necessities of the characters. After that, there's a more reflexive, suspended moment. Explorative, and afterwards the conclusion is pretty dense also.
Yeah, a lot of pace, rhythm, and as far as the violent element is concerned, you know, sometimes we forget, you know, when we talk about fairy tales, those traditional fairy tales did very often have a very violent element to it that is sometimes overlooked, and maybe in a more modern adaptations has kind of softened a little bit, but it was there. And you know, let's face it, life itself has violence. Violence is kind of part of life, sadly, tragically, but sadly true.
But it's everywhere.
Yeah, and you know, let's get into, you know, the another aspect that I found compelling about this film, of course, is the activism, and actually. The journey of Hélène, I believe the character of the film, her name is, you know, she goes through this journey, and it's almost like she's trying to understand herself, but also her own thoughts about activism and her commitment to the activism. Now, how much of that comes from you personally?
I drew a lot from my contradictions. From my personal conviction, yet personal compromises, because I'm the father of two kids. I'm deeply worried, and I have a strong anger about the state of the world. Yet I would say maybe my main goal is to keep that world livable and decent for my kids to grow up in. So yeah, I do a lot from my own contradictions. It's a film of contradictions. It takes a certain intensity. There's a maximal side to it because it's a tale. But I try to make it readable on different level of intensity. So it's a film also about commitment, about relationships, about connections. In the format or in the context of a tale, it gets a certain intensity.
Yeah, and a lot of that intensity, I guess, comes from you, as you said. So that adds another layer to it, I guess. You know, if we think of the film, which I do, and certainly that's the way, in my opinion, film should be considered, animation or real live action as an art form. You know, it's very important for the artist to connect in such a personal way with the work that he's making.
I feel that it's a film of paradox. Like the characters are all paradoxical alter egos in a way. There's a lot of things in it that aren't enough. It's not. It's nothing. For example, just taking care of the world and the people you love isn't enough. On the other hand, not just breaking what needs to be broken or changed without taking care of life and the connection and what makes the world livable isn't enough. It's a film of paradoxes, and there's a I put a lot of my own paradoxes in.
Well, one of the things, of course, that I'd like to dig deeper into is the actual animation style, which I, as I said earlier, found very fascinating. Anybody who will watch this film or has seen this film will definitely be just so impressed with it. And correct me if I'm wrong, you chose to make this film using like hand-drawn animation and graphic tablets and painted colors on paper. First of all, what drew you to this approach? And second of all, how difficult is it to work with this approach?
It is requiring, yet not that, like, it's not more difficult. That we know I have a very good team, very good animators. So we know how to work together, and they're well trained, and we're used to a very author and let's say distinctive approach to animation, very precise. So it wasn't other than another technique, but it has its own specific questions and challenges. The script was written at the very beginning with the goal of not always distinguish characters from the background. It implies that the characters are part of the context where they act, where they live. And on the other hand, backgrounds and context can be seen as emerging from the character's movement and inner life. Like the lines are not always close, figures aren't always separated from the backgrounds, and so it gives a certain sense of abstraction. There's a tension, a dynamic relation between the characters and the background, and that tension, I think, has something to do with the radicalism, the radical purposes of the characters. And all the film was constructed as a sequence of color fields. There are some color fields at the beginning, at the end, and a couple of times within the film itself, and all the sequences were built on a quite a limited palette. I try to stick to a very limited palette to choose what is visible, what will be revealed by movement, or what will be included in the whole of the shot. So it was at the very beginning planned like that. The film can be read also as a sequence of color field on which is emerging a story, characters, movements, and ideas, and everything. And I like that. I like that idea of that relation to abstraction, and that relation to radicalism and extremism. There's erasing the reality, the legibility of reality as something to do with the purpose of the film, the themes that are explored.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously another great thing about the style that you use is this, and you mentioned the word radical, and I actually, I didn't think of that word immediately, but that's it. That's what it is. The color palette that is seen throughout the movie. Certain scenes are in green, others in reds and then whites, So, and I feel like that was a very deliberate choice, as far as the style is concerned, of what you were trying to convey.
Definitely. And the characters are changing colors, so because they adapt to the context, or the context are adapting to their presence. It's a both way relationship. So it's a challenge. It can be read as a radical choice, but I hope it fits with what the film is saying or trying to explore.
But because we're talking about style, obviously this is a hot topic in film today. Since I started interviewing filmmakers and artists, have been talking about how the filmmaking world, in this case, animation world, is adapted to various technologies. And now, of course, AI is causing a lot of disruption. So as we're talking about style, and since we talked about the specific style and the specific style you use for this film in particular, what's your reaction to AI's disruption, positive or negative?
I think AI is mostly an average and median matter. They're dealing with averages and medians. That's useful in commercial products or projects. We're doing very independent auto films, and we're working on singularities. So like all our work is about singularities, ideas, person, even the people we choose to work with, the ideas we're putting on screen. So I think we're evolving aside. AI may bring some tools that will be useful. Right now, it isn't precise enough and controllable enough to be useful in our very precise process. Maybe it will become one day. It would leave us more money just to pay the good people and intelligent people to make more things move, which is good. And in animation, it's like what moves is expensive. So I don't see it as a threat, not at all. But it brings a reflection about democracy, like where and the redistribution of wealth. It's first and foremost in my eyes a way of controlling the revenues, and it will get wealth very concentrated more and more. So I think it brings first and foremost the question about redistributing that wealth, and so also the prediction means. So in our very specific cinema field, I work in Quebec, and in Canada we work with public funding. So we have a little private funding, but it's mostly large majority of public funding. If this stays, AI won't be a problem, but our government will need to tax this AI company so we can have funds to have a cultural, a national culture and a public funded cultural scene.
Interesting point. And of course, this whole matter of AI we need an entirely different podcast to just talk about that alone. But just to put it in perspective, with a film like Death Does Not Exist, how long does that take to work on?
The making itself is a bit more than 4 years. I worked with my main animator, Yunjin Park, for a year and a half, just the two of us to put everything on, the animatic, storyboard animatic, the general layout, and the structure of the film. And then we worked a bit more than, let's say a bit less than 3 years with the whole team, about 40 people, 27 in Montreal and 18 in France. So that's 40, 45, depending on the moment. So it's a bit more than 4 years in the making. Plus, on top of that, the writing, the funding, and everything. So it's a whole bunch. It's a whole period of time.
Yeah, and this might be my last question because, of course, I want to be respectful of your time. But just in terms of the process itself, so we talked about your films being artistic and specifically artistic rather than the more commercial side of animation. So when it comes to a film like Death Does Not Exist, when you come up with the concept from the very beginnings of the project to the end, how much does the film actually change, or is it exactly how you first envisioned it?
Hopefully not. We worked a lot on the script. I work a lot on writing on very beginning, being very precise on the script writing and everything. But it's a living process, hopefully. And I try to keep every steps, the funding, the preparation, the pre-production, the production itself, and the post-production at a certain level of openness. So we can move things, we can change things, we can adapt and evolve, and our ideas are evolving. Our take on the subject matters are evolving. So that film evolved a lot. It has a very darker tone at the very beginning. I tried to make it more open, with a greater space for love, friendship, and the importance of life at the center of it, even if it's a pretty tense and dark story. But hopefully it evolves, it changes, and it ages with us.
And I had a feeling you would say that, you'd want to keep a little bit of openness so that the, our work itself could almost come to life on its own certainly in certain aspects, and you'd have breathing room to play around with, I guess.
That's what I told my kids when they're asking me, why are you making film? Because it's the way I live my life, and it's a beautiful way. So it's the way we live your life. So we try to do it in an honest way, deeply involved, and it moves. It's alive.
Yeah, it's alive. And of course, now it's actually out into the world because, we were just talking about a little before we started the recording. The film premiered in Cannes, which you said was a great experience. And then, of course, now it's screening in Annecy. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what was the experience like in Cannes? What was the reaction to it? And did you have a great time there?
It was a wonderful time, very, very occupied, very busy, hectic. But it was a wonderful privilege to bring a very animated cinema like that with very singular animated mise en scène to the general audience, to people who are film lovers, but in a general sense. So it wasn't a specialized crowd as it will be in Annecy. They're very requiring and specialized in Annecy. Everybody knows about animation. A lot of them are making it. So in Cannes, it was word cinema at its largest aperture. So it was a wonderful experience to bring and to challenge the viewers with our very specific approach and very animated approach. It was for me a real pleasure. Yeah, I'm still a bit tired from it. It was quite an adventure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because very often, animation doesn't get maybe the space that it deserves in, let's say the A festivals, in the main programs of the A festivals. But certainly, with films like yours, maybe it will get more room, and hopefully it will. We need that diversity. But in the meantime, Félix, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Félix Dufour-Laperrière on his latest film, Death Does Not Exist. For more excellent conversations with film professionals and creatives from all walks of life and all over the world, check out more Showcast episodes at filmverdictnetwork.com or look for TFV Network wherever you get your podcasts. Till the next time, from the Film Verdict, this is Matt Micucci signing off. See you soon.